My name is Nellie, and as far back as my memory stretches, I've been captivated by the world in a way that always seemed to baffle my family. While my sister Emma, who was 2 years younger than me, played with dolls and dreamt of becoming a princess, I was the kid who collected leaves, rocks, and anything else I could scrutinize under the tiny magnifying glass I'd found in a cereal box. "Mom, why do leaves change color and fall?" I'd ask, holding up a particularly vibrant maple leaf I'd discovered. "Ask your teacher, Nellie. I'm busy helping Emma with her dance costume," she'd reply, barely sparing me a glance. This was the usual response to my endless barrage of questions about nature and science. I distinctly remember one afternoon when I was 7, sitting at our kitchen table with an array of household items spread out before me. I was engrossed in mixing baking soda with different liquids, fascinated by the reactions. "What in heaven's name are you doing?" Mom's voice suddenly pierced my concentration. "Look at this mess. Clean this up right now. Your sister has her friends coming over for her birthday party, and I need the kitchen." Ah, yes, Emma's birthday parties. They were always extravagant affairs, complete with entertainers, life-sized cartoon characters, and dozens of guests. Mine, on the other hand, were quiet gatherings with just my grandparents and a simple cake. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. "Here's your birthday present, sweetheart," Dad would say, handing me another volume of the science encyclopedia. Don't get me wrong, I loved those books. But watching Emma unwrap her mountain of toys and gadgets at her parties made it abundantly clear where my parents' attention truly lay. Thank goodness for my grandparents, Dad's parents. They were my sanctuary, my escape from the constant reminder that I was the odd one out in our family. Every weekend and school holiday, they'd welcome me into their home with open arms. "Tell me more about what you've learned this week, little scientist," Grandpa would say, his eyes twinkling with genuine interest as I excitedly recounted my latest discoveries. Emma never joined me on my visits to our grandparents. "They're so boring," she'd complain. "Besides, Mom and Dad are taking me to the new theme park this weekend." I'd watch from the window as they drove away, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. "Why can't I go too?" I once asked. "Oh, honey," Mom said, patting my head absently. "You wouldn't enjoy it. You'd probably just want to study the mechanics of the rides instead of having fun." And that's how it was. Emma was the normal one, the one who fit their image of what a daughter should be. And I was the one who asked too many questions, who preferred microscopes to makeup, who didn't quite belong. Things started to shift when I entered middle school. My science teacher, Mrs. Peterson, was the first person outside of my grandparents who seemed to truly see me. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker, your daughter has extraordinary potential," she told my parents during a parent-teacher conference. I was sitting outside the classroom, but I could hear every word. "I've never seen a student grasp complex scientific concepts so naturally. We need to discuss transferring Nellie to our gifted program." Gifted program? Mom's voice had that dismissive tone I knew all too well. "That sounds rather complicated. She's doing fine where she is. Besides, we have to consider Emma. It wouldn't be fair to give Nellie special treatment." I sat there, my heart sinking. Of course they'd say no. They always said no when it came to me. But then, Grandma found out. The next day, she marched into my school like a general going to war. I'll never forget how she stood in the principal's office, her voice firm and unwavering. "My granddaughter will take those tests, and she will have every opportunity she deserves. I don't care what her parents said. But Mrs. Walker, we need parental consent. I'll handle my son and his wife. You just make sure Nellie gets her chance." And somehow, she did it. After a week of intense discussions, and I suspect some financial incentives from my grandparents, my parents finally agreed to let me take the placement tests. I passed them all with flying colors. Suddenly, my world expanded. The gifted program opened doors I never knew existed. International science competitions, academic olympiads, research seminars. I threw myself into all of it. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, who got excited about the same things I did. I won my first international competition with a project about sustainable ecosystems. Then another, and another. "Where should we put this one?" Grandpa would ask each time I brought home a new trophy or diploma. In the box with the others, I'd say, pulling out my special cardboard box from under the bed. I never displayed my awards, partly because I didn't want to seem boastful, but mostly because I knew they made my parents uncomfortable. Emma, of course, had her own take on my success. "Nobody likes a know-it-all," she'd sneer, but then she'd turn around and say, "Hey, can you help me with my science homework, and maybe just do it for me?" "Emma, that's cheating," I'd protest. "Nellie, help your sister right now," Mom would inevitably command. Family helps family. So I'd end up doing Emma's work, feeling like a fraud, but too afraid to stand up to my parents. It became a pattern. Emma would demand, my parents would insist, and I would comply. I often overheard my parents talking about me when they thought I wasn't listening. Their whispered conversations would float up the stairs to my room, where I'd be sitting with my chemistry set or the latest research paper. "I just don't understand where she gets it from," Mom would say. "No one in our family is like this." "Maybe she was switched at birth," Dad would joke, but the undertone of seriousness in his voice hurt more than if he'd meant it as a pure jest. One evening, after I'd won another science competition, I heard Dad's voice from his study. He was talking to Emma about her struggling grades. "It's not fair that she's so smart," Emma whined. "Listen, sweetheart," Dad's voice softened. "The weak need to be supported. That's why we focus on you. Nellie. Well, she'll be fine on her own." I pressed my back against the wall, fighting back tears. They thought they were justifying their neglect with twisted logic, as if being capable somehow meant I didn't need love or support. At school, I was that weird girl who spent lunch breaks in the laboratory instead of the cafeteria. Sure, people would come to me for help with their science homework, but real friendships? Those were rare. Grandma and Grandpa were my rocks. They'd listen for hours as I explained my latest experiments or theories. They never made me feel like I was too much or too different. "Look what I found for you," Grandpa would say, pulling out scientific journals or new equipment for my experiments. "I thought this might interest you." But despite having my grandparents' support, the hole in my heart where my parents' love should have been felt vast and empty. I'd watch other families at school events, parents proudly hugging their kids, siblings supporting each other, and feel a deep ache in my chest. Then came the news that would change everything. I was graduating early. At 16, I'd completed all my high school requirements and had been offered a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. The day I left for university felt like breathing fresh air for the first time. The campus was buzzing with energy, and for once, I wasn't the odd one out. In my advanced chemistry class, I met Sarah and Michael, who got just as excited about molecular structures as I did. For the first time in my life, I had friends who truly understood me. We'd spend hours in the lab, bouncing ideas off each other, getting excited about discoveries that would make most people's eyes glaze over. But even as I thrived in my new environment, a part of me still yearned for my family's approval. I'd call home weekly, hoping for more than the brief, disinterested conversations I usually got. "Yes, Nellie, that's nice," Mom would say when I tried to tell her about my research. "Oh, did you hear about Emma's new job? She's working at that fancy boutique downtown." I didn't know it then, but my time at university was the calm before the storm. It happened during one of my routine calls home. I was in the middle of my second semester, deep into my research project, when Mom's voice caught my attention. "And with your father's condition getting worse," she was saying to Dad, probably thinking I was on mute. "What about Grandpa?" I interrupted, my heart suddenly racing. "Mom, what's wrong with him?" There was a pause, too long to be innocent. "Oh, Nellie, I didn't realize you were still there." "It's nothing serious, just a minor health issue. He's already recovering." "I'm coming home," I said immediately, already mentally calculating the fastest route. "I can be there by tomorrow morning." No, don't be ridiculous." Mom's voice turned sharp. "You need to focus on your studies. Emma is helping them out. Everything's under control." Something felt off about her tone, but I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Still, I called Grandma right after. "Oh yes, dear," Grandma said, her voice oddly distant. Emma's been such a help. She comes by often to check on your grandfather. Emma? The same sister who used to say visiting our grandparents was boring? Something wasn't adding up. 2 weeks later, I stood at my grandparents' familiar front door, my heart pounding with anticipation. But instead of Grandma's warm welcome, I found Emma blocking the doorway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her face a mask of fake surprise. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma. How is he?" "No one's home," she said quickly, too quickly. "They're out." "Out? Grandpa's sick. Where would they go?" "I don't know, Nellie. Just go away." She started to close the door. "Wait!" I put my foot in the doorway. "Let me come in and wait for them." "No one's home." She shoved the door hard against my foot. "God, you're so annoying. Just leave." Confused and hurt, I tried calling Grandma. Straight to voicemail. This wasn't like her at all. She always kept her phone on for me. With nowhere else to go, I headed to my parents' house, hoping for answers. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen when I arrived. "Nellie, what are you doing home?" Dad asked, not even trying to hide his annoyance. "I came to see Grandpa and Grandma, but they're not home. Emma wouldn't let me in." "Oh, honey," Mom interrupted, exchanging a look with Dad. "We were going to tell you. Your grandparents are in a nursing home." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What? Why? Didn't anyone tell me?" "It was a quick decision," Dad said smoothly. "They needed specialized care. It's better this way." "Which nursing home? I want to visit them." "They're under quarantine right now," Mom said quickly. "No visitors allowed. Maybe next time." Eventually, I did go back to university, but something felt terribly wrong. I tried to focus on my lab work, but my mind kept circling back to that afternoon at their door, to Emma's hostile face, to my parents' too smooth explanations. That terrible call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of an experiment when my phone lit up with Mom's number. The fluorescent lights of the university lab hummed above me as my heart started racing. Something about the timing of this call felt ominous. "Nellie," she said, her voice oddly flat. "Your grandfather passed away last night." The test tube I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed through the empty lab like a gunshot. "What?" "No." "When's the funeral?" My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Thursday at 2 p.m. Don't be late." The way she said it felt strange, almost rehearsed. I didn't even bother cleaning up the broken glass. I rushed out of the lab, my mind spinning with grief and confusion. My beloved grandfather, gone. No chance to say goodbye, no final words of wisdom from the man who had believed in me my whole life. I took the first flight I could get, spending the entire journey trying to hold back tears as memories of him flooded my mind. At 1:30 p.m., I made my way to the church. The empty parking lot was my first clue that something was terribly wrong. My footsteps echoed in the silent building as I approached the entrance, dread building with each step. Inside, a custodian was methodically cleaning the floors. "The Walker funeral?" he asked when I inquired, looking up from his work. "That ended hours ago. They held it at 10 a.m. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The world started spinning around me as I grabbed onto a nearby pew for support. Frantically, I pulled out my phone and called my parents. "Oh, Nellie," Mom's voice dripped with disappointment. "You must have mixed up the times. We clearly said 10 a.m. "No," I said firmly, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "You said 2 p.m. I wrote it down. I know you said 2 p.m. Where's Grandma? I need to talk to her." "Your grandmother is still in the nursing home," Dad cut in, "and she doesn't want to see you right now. She's very upset you missed the funeral." I told my parents I was heading back to university, but my feet had other plans. I found myself driving to my grandparents' house, desperate for answers, for some kind of explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. The familiar street looked exactly the same: the old oak tree, the carefully tended garden, the wind chimes Grandma loved so much. My hands were trembling as I rang the doorbell. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and there stood Grandma, the same Grandma who was supposedly in a nursing home, refusing to see me. "Grandma." I moved to hug her. relief flooding through me at the sight of her familiar face. But she stepped back, and the look in her eyes stopped me cold. Her face was hard and unfamiliar, like she was looking at a stranger instead of her granddaughter. "So now you decide to show up?" Her voice was cold, nothing like the warm tones that had comforted me throughout my childhood. "Grandma, what's going on? They told me you were in a nursing home." The words tumbled out as I tried to make sense of what was happening. "Don't." She held up her hand, and the gesture felt like a physical blow. "Your grandfather called you over and over. He was asking for you on his deathbed, wanting to say goodbye to his little scientist. But you couldn't be bothered to answer his calls or visit him. How could you be so cruel, Nellie?" "Let me see the number he was calling," I said, my voice barely steady. "Please, Grandma, I need to understand this." Grandma disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a small notepad. Her hands were shaking as she showed me the number scribbled in Grandpa's familiar handwriting. That's not my number," I whispered, staring at the unfamiliar digits. "I've had the same number since high school." "They gave you a fake number." "What do you mean, fake number?" Grandma's stern expression began to crack. "Your parents said you changed it when you went to university. They said you wanted to distance yourself from us." The pieces were starting to fall into place. "Grandma, I came here during break. Emma was here. She wouldn't let me in. She said no one was home. Then Mom and Dad told me you and Grandpa were in a nursing home." Grandma's face went pale. "Nursing home? We never—" "Emma and your parents told us you were too busy with your new university life to visit. They said," her voice cracked, "they said you were ashamed of us, that we weren't sophisticated enough for you anymore. They said—" "What?" My knees felt weak. How could they? "Grandma, they told me the funeral was at 2 p.m. today. When I got to the church, it was already over. They said I mixed up the times, but I didn't. I would never—" "The funeral was at 10 a.m., Grandma said slowly, realization dawning in her eyes. "Your parents stood there and told everyone how ashamed they were that you couldn't even be bothered to come to your own grandfather's funeral. Emma was crying about how she'd tried so hard to reach you. I fell into her arms then, both of us dissolving into tears on the front porch. All the pain, all the confusion, all the manufactured distance between us poured out as we held each other. He died thinking I abandoned him," I sobbed into her shoulder. "Grandpa died thinking I didn't care." "Shh." Grandma stroked my hair like she used to when I was little, her own tears falling. "We know the truth now. We know." After we dried our tears, Grandma picked up the phone with a determined look on her face. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Linda? Yes, it's me. I need you, Robert, and Emma to come over right away. There are some important documents we need to discuss. No, it can't wait." "They'll be here in an hour," Grandma said, hanging up the phone. I told them I had important documents to discuss. The lawyer is on his way too. When the doorbell rang, Grandma squeezed my hand. "Stay in the kitchen until I call you." I heard them enter. Mom's practiced social laugh, Dad's formal greetings, Emma's bored sighs. Then Grandma's voice, unusually sharp. "Please everyone, take a seat. Mr. Harrison is here to read George's will." That was my cue. I stepped into the living room just as the lawyer was opening his briefcase. The looks on their faces were unforgettable. Mom's perfect smile frozen in place, Dad's face draining of color, Emma's mouth hanging open in shock. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading. "I, George Walker, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament." The room was silent except for the rustle of papers. First came the house, left to Grandma, along with a substantial sum for her ongoing care and maintenance. Then came the surprise that made Emma's face turn red with anger. "To my granddaughter, Nellie Walker, I leave my newly constructed laboratory facility at 1420 Pine Street, fully equipped and ready for her research work. All necessary permits and paperwork have been processed and finalized." I couldn't believe my ears. Grandpa had built me a lab. My own research facility. The remainder of my estate, Mr. Harrison continued, is to be divided equally between my granddaughters, Nellie and Emma Walker. Emma's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up abruptly, but Grandma raised her hand. "There's more," she said, pulling out a letter. "Your grandfather wanted this read as well." "My dear family," Grandma began reading, her voice strong and clear. "I've watched over the years as favoritism has poisoned our family. To my son and daughter-in-law, your treatment of your daughters has been shameful. Each child deserves equal love, equal support." "Stop," Emma screamed, jumping to her feet. "This is ridiculous. Why should she get anything? Do you know what I had to do? All those hours sitting with that boring old man, pretending to care." Mom tried to shush her, but Emma was beyond control. "You promised," she turned on our parents. "You said if I played nice, if I visited him and acted like the perfect granddaughter, everything would be mine. You made me grovel to a dying man." The raw truth of their manipulation was finally exposed in all its ugliness. "And now what?" Emma continued, her voice getting shriller. "Little Miss Perfect gets a whole laboratory, and I only get half the money." "No! Give me the house! She doesn't need both. She can have her precious lab." I sat there in silence, watching my sister's true colors emerge in all their violent shades. The perfect daughter act had finally cracked, revealing the ugly reality beneath. "Well?" Mom broke the tense silence. "Nellie, you heard your sister. Be reasonable. Do you know how much we've invested in your education? All those science camps, competitions." I almost laughed. "You didn't pay for any of that. Grandma and Grandpa did." "That's not the point," Mom cut in sharply. "Family means sacrifice. If you want to honor your grandfather's memory, you'll sign over your share to Emma. She needs it more than you do." "Honor his memory?" Grandma's voice cut through the room like a whip. She stood up, Grandpa's letter still in her hands. "Let me remind you exactly what George had to say about this family's idea of sacrifice." She began reading again. "To my son and his wife, your blatant favoritism has created a poison in this family. Your treatment of Nellie has been nothing short of emotional abuse, while you've turned Emma into an entitled, spoiled—" "How dare you!" Emma shrieked. "No, how dare you!" Grandma's voice thundered with a force I'd never heard before. "You all manipulated and lied to a dying man. You kept his beloved granddaughter from saying goodbye to him, and now you have the audacity to talk about family and sacrifice?" She walked to the door and flung it open. "Get out, all of you. And Emma, I'm sorry George left you anything at all. You're nothing but a spoiled, selfish girl who learned from spoiled, selfish parents." They left in a flurry of threats and slammed doors. The house felt eerily quiet in their wake. That was 5 years ago. Today, I run my own research laboratory, the one Grandpa built for me. It's everything I could have dreamed of, and more. Sometimes, when I'm working late at night, I swear I can feel his presence, proud and loving as ever. Grandma visits often. We have dinner together every Sunday, and she loves touring the lab, asking questions about my latest projects. She's taken some science classes at the local community college, saying it helps her understand my work better. But I think she just wants to share in the passion Grandpa and I always had for discovery. I haven't spoken to my parents or Emma since that day. Sometimes I see their names in my email inbox or their numbers on my phone, but I delete them without opening. They made their choice long ago, and now I've made mine. The other day, I found an old photo of Grandpa in one of his books. He was in his garden, pointing out something to a much younger me who was peering through a magnifying glass. On the back, he'd written, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I keep that photo on my desk now. Not all family is bound by blood, I've learned. Sometimes the truest family are the ones who believe in you, who support your dreams, who love you not, despite your differences but because of them. Story 2. We were what you would consider a normal middle-class family, and my name is Hannah. Dad was employed by a construction business as a senior project manager. Mom stayed at home to look after us, and my younger sister, Amber, was the apple of everyone's eye. We occupied a little home outside of Cleveland. It was simple, but it was home. You don't have to work while you're in college, Hannah, my love. During my first year, Dad would constantly reassure me that I made enough money to sustain us all, but I refused to listen. I desired my own money, even though my tuition was covered by my full scholarship. I thus accepted a part-time position at Wilson's department store, working on the weekends and in the evenings in between classes. It was during my sophomore year when everything changed. It was a routine Tuesday in March when I got the call that would flip our life upside down. My phone buzzed as I was restocking shelves at Wilson's. "Hannah?" Mom seldom spoke above a whisper. "At work, your father suffered a heart attack. They were unable to. They couldn't save him." Suddenly, the store's fluorescent lights felt too bright. Overhead, the banal pop music grew muted and far away. At the burial, I recall collapsing on the shelf as my knees gave out. Mom pretended to be fearless. She squeezed my hand and reassured me. "Hannah, don't worry about money. We have enough left over from your father to last a few years. You concentrate on your academics." In my opinion, her father had always handled money responsibly, putting in extra hours and taking on extra tasks to make sure we would be safe. He once informed me that he had saved money and a big life insurance policy. I immersed myself into my work and studies that spring in an attempt to deal with the loss. I saw that Mom and Amber were shopping more than normal, but they seemed to be managing it in their own manner. At the time, I didn't give it much thought. People who are grieving tend to act strangely, right? The phone call that would destroy what was left of our routine lives then arrived. "Hannah," Mom spoke tensely. "This weekend you have to return home. We must speak." My stomach was in knots when I traveled home that weekend. When I got there, Mom and Amber were in the living room. "What's happening?" Leaving my suitcase outside the entrance, I inquired. The living room had new furnishings. I saw that Dad's cozy armchair was missing. Mom avoided looking at me as she wrung her hands. "I have to tell you something, Hannah, my dearest." She took a big breath. "The cash, it's gone, everything." The word struck me like a punch to the body. "Gone? What do you mean?" "For years, Dad left us enough. In less than a year, how could it all be gone?" Mom began to explain, sounding protective but yet somewhat proud, as though she were enumerating accomplishments. Amber needed an outfit for prom. After all, she only gets one prom. She then spent 2 weeks in Mexico with her buddies following graduation. Mexico. I broke off, using the money from my father's life insurance. We had to go. As if a vacation were as necessary as breathing, Amber dove right in. Then came my birthday celebration. Mom and I joined several really wonderful social groups, and everyone agreed it was the nicest party of the year. "We were simply so heartbroken about your father, honey," Mom hurriedly added. "We needed to escape from our problems and live a bit. Don't you understand? Life is not long. We learned from the death of your father to have fun while we can." What I was hearing was unbelievable. It was astounding how far from reality everything seemed. Get your mind off of problems by completely depleting Dad's life insurance. "Mom, you should obtain a job to divert your attention, not by wasting money on pointless things." "Hannah." Mom let out a gasp, like though I had spoken something startling. "You don't get it," I went on. "Wealth doesn't appear out of thin air. Has Dad ever spent this much money?" "No, because he recognized its worth. He earned every penny by hard effort. And it's all gone now, because the two of you made the decision to live a bit." Mom's face fell flat, and she clenched her fists tightly. "Oh, so you also want me to pass away from a heart attack, similar to your dad. Do you want it that way? To murder your mom under stress?" As they sat there behaving like victims, I stood there dumbfounded and silent. I became aware of the details I had initially overlooked. The past due notifications are partially concealed behind periodicals. The electric company's shut-off warning was shown on the counter. I entered the kitchen and opened each cupboard one at a time, finding them mostly empty. I looked in the freezer, only frozen treats and ice cream. For the first time, they were living like adolescents, spending money without considering the future. "What's left?" I inquired gently, already dreading the response. Mom was hesitant, though. "A few credit card invoices are included." The situation's truth struck me like a ton of bricks. It was this. Everything Dad had earned, he had preserved it all to protect our future, lost. the extra hours he had worked. He had meticulously planned to ensure our safety, squandered in a year of careless spending. I could see no genuine comprehension of what my mother and sister had done by the expressions on their faces, no understanding of the seriousness of what they were doing. I was forced to leave school and return home. The adult in this situation has to be someone, and it would obviously have to be me. Returning home was like going back in time. I was hired as a cashier at Super Value within a week. Mr. Thompson, the manager, appeared to comprehend my predicament. In my interview, he remarked, "Look, Hannah, after your primary shift, I can also provide you some merchandising time. It's extra cash, but it's hardly glamorous." I accepted it without question. My days now began at 7 in the morning, finished at 10 p.m. behind the register, filling shelves. At least it was something, even though the work was exhausting. Then Mom and Amber arrived at my checkout line for the first time. Their cart was brimming with out-of-season food and high-end brands. "Good, I see. You're employed." Mom smiled, as though she had just met me at a gathering we had thrown to get supplies for the house. I began looking through their belongings and saw the total increase steadily. My mother simply smiled and pointed at me when it reached 287.43s. She enthusiastically told the other cashier, who had arrived to assist with the bag, that Hannah will take care of this. I paid in the end, seeing a sizable portion of my profits for the day vanish in a single transaction. However, that was only the start. Amber made an announcement when she ran into the store the next week. "I'm switching to vegetarianism. It's far more healthful." Before seeing her vegetarian diet, I believed that going vegetarian might actually save us money. Natural. Everything. A pound of premium nuts costs $15. I couldn't even pronounce the winter exotic veggies and fresh berries. The cost of each shopping excursion increased. I sat down with the receipts strewn all over the kitchen table at the conclusion of my first month. We spent nearly $1,200 on food this month. "Trying to stabilize my boy," I said. "We need to make some cuts. Perhaps we should shop the sales or purchase generic goods. My health is not being compromised." Amber cut in, her voice becoming high-pitched. "Do you realize how vital it is to eat organic? Regular vegetables has pesticides that literally cause cancer. We can eat healthy without." "You simply don't comprehend," yelled Amber. "Hannah, this is no luxury." "My health is this. Please, girls, Mom." One hand was cut in and placed against her chest. "My heart is warring about all of this. It's too much for me. Do you want me to end up like your father?" Her voice trembled. The tension. I felt lightheaded. Between the cashier and the shelves, I observed this act with increasing desperation. I was working nearly 15 hours a day. For what purpose? To pay for their most recent whims. However, they wouldn't even entertain the idea of seeking employment themselves. However, the same Amber's indignation and Mom's cardiac issues were always the answer when I attempted to bring up budgets. Observing them now, Amber scowled at me arrogantly over her $7 organic smoothie as Mom wiped at her eyes. I came to terms with the fact that this would be my life for the foreseeable future. 6 months have gone since I started working at Super Value. I had to work double shifts for 6 months, endure foot pain, and see my paychecks go into the abyss of my family's bills. Amber, meantime, hadn't held a job since graduating. She was splayed out on the couch one evening, using her phone to browse Instagram. A 15-hour shift just ended, and something inside of me exploded. "We need to discuss, Amber." Dropping onto my dad's old recliner, I murmured, "I can't continue to work alone. I'm worn out. You must find employment." Her lower lip started shaking instantly. "Hannah, you don't get it. I'm still in the process of determining my life's purpose. In fact," she became active and sat up. "Madison and Jessica have enrolled in these incredible courses for personal development. They think it's a great way to discover your purpose." I gaped at her in shock. "Courses for personal development? Do you mean me?" "They're extremely transformational." Her cheeks began to well up with tears. "I'm in urgent need of this. I'm dealing with a lot." "What precisely are you going through?" I was unable to control the sharpness in my voice. Because their parents are busy, Jessica and Madison are able to enroll in as many classes as they choose. We are in a different circumstance. Dad has left, Mom is not employed. And in an effort to support this family, I'm killing myself. We can't afford for you to find yourself right now. Hannah. Mom arrived at the doorway, precisely on cue. You have no right to talk like way to your sister. She's still digesting things, don't you think? Processing, I repeated. Mom, it's been a year. Amber's soul is extremely sensitive. Mom moved to sit next to my sister and urged, she needs time to recuperate. The loss of her father has left her quite vulnerable. She must be ready before we push her. Between them, I left my mother caressing Amber's hair as my sister let out a dramatic sniffle and experienced a bone-deep wave of exhaustion. I had made this my life. Living in a dream world where money came magically and grown-up responsibilities could be put off indefinitely, they worked 2 jobs. Months passed slowly. It had been a year after Dad's passing, a year of working double shifts and never-ending fatigue. There were noticeable evidence of wear and tear on the home. The roof leaked, the furnace produced alarming noises, and the plumbing was becoming unreliable. I was able to create a different savings account just for home repairs. I aimed to accumulate enough money each month to cover at least the necessary repairs. One evening, I opened my banking app and said, Mom, I'm going to give you access to this account, but it's only for groceries. Okay. The remainder must be kept for future repairs. The house needs maintenance and we can't keep putting it off. With big, sincere eyes, she put her hand over mine. Naturally, I totally understand, sweetie. Don't be concerned about anything. The fund for house repairs wasn't increasing quickly enough, even if Mom had promised to pay for groceries. My friend Sarah called one evening with what appeared to be the ideal answer. We're hiring at my startup, Hannah, she exclaimed. It's excellent for Amber. Healthy living is very important to the CEO. In fact, he is also a vegetarian. Someone for the front desk is needed. Simple administrative tasks. Experience is not required. I straightened my posture. Really? What would she need to do? Just answer phones, welcome people, manage some emails, make coffee, that type of stuff. The atmosphere is really laid back and youthful, and the pay is respectable. Do you think she may be interested? The sound was nearly too flawless. Tonight I'll speak with her. To my utter surprise, Amber genuinely appeared thrilled when I told her about it. A startup? That sounds awesome, she said. And the boss is vegetarian. I mean, that was just meant to be. I had a better first week than I had anticipated. Every day, Amber was full of stories about the wonderful office atmosphere and how genuine everyone was when she got home. However, the song had undergone a significant modification by the conclusion of the second week. Ugh. Slumping into the couch, Amber grumbled, These clients are so demanding. Dave is always on my case, and they expect me to be extremely professional when I'm on the phone or something. Dave, I asked the CEO. He had the audacity to tell me that I wasn't using proper phone manners. Please pardon me for being real rather than acting like a professional. I felt sick to my stomach. What was it that he said? I can't say, he said. Yes, as well as during client conversations. She sighed. Additionally, it seems that I should write down messages rather than relying solely on my memory. It's really poisonous. The scenario quickly became worse. Sarah called me the next day. Hannah. We must discuss Amber, she replied softly. Dave is considering releasing her. When he requested her to make a spreadsheet of incoming calls, she completely lost it. My heart fell. Give me his number, Sarah. Please let me talk to him. Dave and I spoke on the phone for 45 minutes. I described our father's passing, Amber's sensitivity, and how she simply needed some time to get used to the demands of the job. He ultimately consented to give her another opportunity. There appeared to be a turn for the better throughout the next month. Amber was still working, and she appeared to be happy for once. Once you get used to them, the clients aren't so bad, she said over dinner one evening. My phone manners have improved, Dave added. A burden was lifted off my shoulders. Perhaps this was the pivotal moment we required. Perhaps Amber was finally maturing and gaining maturity. Then came payday. Amber virtually floated in with joy as I was replenishing shelves at SuperValue. Hannah. I received my first actual paycheck. Hannah. That's fantastic. Sincerely pleased for her, I grinned. Will you start a savings account? If you would like, I can assist you in creating a budget. Amber wasn't paying attention, though. With her money in her hand like a golden ticket, she was practically halfway out the door. I can't speak right now. At the mall, meeting the females. Amber returned home that evening with a brand new iPhone that was financed for 24 months, designer shoes, shopping bags, and new outfits from pricey stores. Amber, I answered cautiously, have you spent all of your earnings? Of course. She gave an eye roll. I have to present myself professionally at work. These are bits of investment. She produced a silk blouse that most likely cost more than the 2 days I spent making it. Besides, it's my money. I merited it. But what about lending a hand with the house repairs and the bills? Hannah, oh my God. Be less of a buzzkill. I earned this money through hard work. I'm worthy of good things. I suppressed my annoyance. Perhaps she simply required more time to become financially responsible. Perhaps things will be different next month. No, it wasn't. Another month went by. My phone rang when I was in the middle of my super value shift. It was Sarah Hannah. She spoke hesitantly. I'm not sure how to explain it, but Amber recently resigned. After receiving her money, she left. Davis, indignant. I felt sick to my stomach. She left. She didn't even give notice, simply accepted her check and walked away. Hannah, I'm so sorry. It makes me feel awful to suggest her. You're not to blame. My thoughts was already racing when I said that out of habit. I had to leave. I clasped my fists on the steering wheel as I drove home from work early. When I got there, the home was oddly silent. There are no lights on. My calls went unanswered. Mom, Amber, nothing. The closets were ajar, close. I'm missing the attic suitcases. Lost. With shaky fingertips, I rushed to my laptop as a bad sensation began to grow inside of me. After months of building up the repair cash, I logged into my bank account. Mom said she would just spend it for food. Our crumbling house was cleaned out by the person who was supposed to fix it. There was just $200 left. Amber's message chimed on my phone. Don't panic. Mom and I definitely needed a break. We're headed to Hawaii for 2 weeks. Don't bother attempting to locate us. We will return at some point. I adore you. Another message before I could even comprehend that. Try to understand, even though I know you're probably upset about the money. Money comes and goes, but mental health is precious. This trip was just what we needed to start the healing process. Self-care cannot be priced, but you can always earn more money. As the situation's reality set in, I read the messages repeatedly while staring at them. Not only had my sister and mother embezzled my money, all of my remaining trust, hope, and love had been used by them. Initially, I wanted to call the police. Even my finger was hanging over the keypad of my phone. Even though I was aware that Mom frequently fabricated her symptoms in order to manipulate others, I then considered her heart condition. The germ of uncertainty was always there. What if it was real this time? What if anything major was really set off by the stress of legal issues? I couldn't risk having that on my conscience. Looking around the home, my eyes fell on the new refrigerator I got last month. The dishwasher comes next, the washing machine, the big television set in the main room. I had meticulously chosen each piece of furniture in advance of the restoration. That would never occur, right now. I paid for everything out of pocket, from missing weekends and working additional shifts. I tried to speak steadily when I called my buddy Rachel. I responded, "Remember when you said your parents were trying to rent that empty house?" "Yes. Tenants have still not been located. Why?" I inhaled deeply. "Would they think about letting me rent it? I must leave this place." Rachel didn't inquire about specifics. I really liked that about her. I'll give them a call now. She returned her call within 1 hour. They agreed, and they're prepared to reduce the rent for you. 50% off. Hannah, they are aware of your diligence. The next day, I called moving firms to obtain bids. After that, I began compiling lists of all the things I had bought in the previous 12 months. The entire process took 3 days to plan. In accordance with my thorough instructions, the movers arrived early in the morning. The new couch and armchairs, the TV, the refrigerator and the washing, the dining set. I had even installed the shower heads and faucets myself. Everything I had paid for myself. It's the final throw pillow. Once everything was transferred into Rachel's parents' house, I made one more visit to SuperValue. Mr. Thompson was working on paperwork in his office. "Hannah," he replied, looking up. "What's the matter?" I filled him in on the theft, the necessity to relocate, and my desire for a new beginning. "Is it possible for me to switch to another store?" I inquired. "They won't think to search for me there." He made no hesitation. Experienced employees are needed at the Gateway site. In actuality, it's closer to your current residence. I am able to call at this moment, and when my family comes seeking, could you please beg them not to tell them where I've gone? Decisively. "Consider it done. You're one of my finest workers, Hannah. We look after our own." I had moved into my new house and started working at my new store before the end of the week. Despite the small size of the home, everything fit flawlessly. For the first time in more than a year, I had my furniture, my appliances, and a new beginning. In Hawaii, I had the impression that I could breathe. It's likely that my sister and mother were still enjoying cocktails on the shore. Well done. Relating to their path of self-care. They were unaware that half a home would be waiting for them when they got back. I moved out 2 weeks ago. The messages began to pour in. Mom's warnings were the first. "I'm going to call the cops. You took our appliances and furnishings." Then followed Amber's irate voicemails. "How could you harm us like this? We're your family. You're really self-centered." I ignored the texts, erased the unread emails, and put them all on voicemail. One day, Mr. Thompson called to inform me that they had arrived at my former store. "Your mom was making a big commotion. Security had to escort them out," he claimed. "Do not be concerned. They were not informed." Mom mailed me what I anticipated would be her trump card a month into my new existence. "Hannah." My heart. "It's serious, according to the doctors. I may pass away at any time. Give me a call, please. Mom needs you." Against my better judgment, I called to my total lack of surprise. Mom responded, sounding quite well and happy. "Hannah, we've learnt our lesson, my love. You truly made us realize how mistaken we were. We will never exploit you again. Come home, please." In the background, I could hear Amber. "Tell her we need groceries. It's been days since we had a healthy meal. When she returns, tell her to bring dinner." This time, something new joined the customary rage that swelled in my chest. Clarity. "I'm not coming back. We have changed," I murmured softly. Mom objected. "Now we get it. No, you haven't." "No, you don't. You're still attempting to control me. You're still attempting to hold me accountable for you. I'm finished." I immediately disabled their phone numbers, emails, social media accounts, and everything else after hanging up. It was like setting down a heavy weight I'd been carrying for too long. After then, things improved. After noticing my work ethic, my new manager at Gateway SuperValue offered me an administrator position with a significant pay increase, for the first time since the death of my father. My budget gave me some leeway. I resumed saving, this time in an account that was only accessible to me via friends and relatives. I hear tidbits about Amber and Mom. Both of them were hired to work opposite shifts at a nearby cafe. Old habits, however, are hard to break. They continue to live paycheck to paycheck and purchase anything that appeals to them. The house, which was once Dad's pride and pleasure, is slowly crumbling apart. When I last heard, there were 3 leaks in the roof. I occasionally consider reaching out during calm periods. The door isn't shut all the time. I don't believe it is, anyhow. However, they must first demonstrate genuine transformation. Not only statements or assurances, but concrete proof that they have matured and acquired responsibility. They need to fix the house, acquire financial management skills, give up relying on others to save them. Until then, I'm concentrating on my own life. I'm putting money aside for a trustworthy second-hand vehicle. I intend to re-enroll in college after that. Initially, perhaps not full-time, but a few classes every semester. Education, according to Dad, is something that no one can take away from you. He was correct, as if he had a lot of things right. Even now, my phone occasionally displays messages from unidentified numbers. Mom and Amber are attempting to contact me in new ways. I don't read them before deleting them. We might get back together someday, but it will have to be something different. One that is healthy. For now, I'm living my life for me. And for the first time in a long time, that seems perfectly right. Story 3. I never imagined I'd be sharing my tale. Yet here I am, 30 years old, and finally ready to share it. My name is Erica, and this is how my life changed forever when I was 13. We were what you would call a typical family back then. Mom, Dad, and I live alone in our comfortable home on Maple Street. Dad worked in construction, and Mom was a part-time bookkeeper. Despite our lack of wealth, we were content. Everything fell apart after Dad suffered his accident. On a typical Tuesday morning, he was on his way to work 1 minute. What about the next one? He was gone all right, just like that. Mom broke down. Fell apart altogether. She would gaze at nothing for hours on end. I also had to quickly learn how to take care of myself. "Erica, honey," she said to me one evening, approximately 6 months after Dad died. "I have something essential to tell you." She was sitting at our kitchen table, fidgeting with her coffee cup like she always did when she was nervous. "I've met someone. His name is Robert, and he brings me joy once more. I should have seen it coming." "Really?" The late-night phone calls make her suddenly worry about how she looks once more. She had to conduct an enigmatic errand. However, it still felt like a kick in the gut when she informed me that Robert and his 6-year-old daughter, Sarah, would be moving in with us. But I objected. "Mom, Dad was just gone 6 months ago." "Sweetheart, I am aware." She interrupted me, adopting the severe tone of voice I had begun to hear more frequently. "But life carries on. Sarah needs a mother figure, and Robert is a decent man. We can reunite as a family, a household." That's the name she gave it. 2 weeks later, Robert moved in with his daughter and boxes of belongings, and she saw our house as if it were a palace straight out of a fairy tale. Sarah was a little girl with large blue eyes and blonde pigtails. My mother had always wished for a pretty young daughter like this one. "Erica, look at her," Mom would say, watching Sarah color or play with her dolls. "She is precious, isn't she? At this age, she requires a great deal of love and care." Yes, she required care. My mother was more than willing to give it everything. She seemed to have all she had, leaving nothing for me. I became invisible as my mother changed into the ideal stepmother for Sarah, and I watched. Dinner was the first time I truly grasped how things would work. About a week after they moved in, Robert's mother had come over this woman who would become the misery of my existence. After glancing at me, she said, "Oh, you're such a big girl." She then leaned over and gave me a really painful squeeze on my cheek that made me want to scream. What a lovely face. She described how her fingers dug like claws into my flesh. "But you know, Robert, this place would be perfectly great. Death." She didn't have to, but she didn't continue the statement. I could see how she gazed at me, as if I were a discoloration on her son's brand new, flawless family photo. That night, I found bruises on my cheeks where she'd pinched me. However, Mom simply shook her head when I attempted to show her. Life fell into a rhythm, but not when I was part of Mom. Sarah and Robert developed into a flawless little team that always worked together. Going to the park, hosting movie evenings, or simply chatting over dinner and making goofy jokes about Sarah. In the meantime, I was frequently shipped off to the home of Mom's friend Janet. "Erica, sweetheart," Mom would say, avoiding eye contact. "Today, Janet needs assistance with tiny Emily. You don't mind, do you?" At least someone appeared pleased to see me when I went to Janet's place. With her lively curls and a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room, Emily was 4 years old and utterly charming. As soon as I went through the door, she would come to me, shouting, "Eerie, eerie." The best part of my days was really playing with Emily. I would make all the goofy voices in stories we read, host tea parties with her stuffed animals, or construct blanket forts. Janet would join us, offer refreshments, and occasionally inquire about school while paying attention to my responses. Family should feel at home, and it seemed normal. The story was different. Mrs. Henderson, Robert's mother, had all but moved in. At least that's how it felt. Every time she suggested new paint colors, moved furniture, or offered criticism on the drapes, Mom delighted at the chance to implement the modification. She said these walls should be eggshell, not cream, she'd declare. And next thing you know, Mom would be in the hardware store picking out paint samples. The living room furniture has to be adjusted for optimal feng shui. Mom would spend the entire weekend moving bulky furniture because she insisted on it. I was still being tormented by her favorite pastime, though. I felt my skin bursting as she squeezed my cheeks between her bony fingers. She would squeeze harder and add, "I see you're still not holding your fork properly." Such bad manners at the table. Your mother ought to have given you greater instruction. Or she would see me on the couch reading. Take a look at how slouched she is. No surprise she has such poor posture. Squeezed. My Sarah will never be seen sitting like that. Robert, in his own way, was as awful. He would blow up if I dropped a plate or knocked over a glass while cleaning the dishes. "Are you aware of the price?" His cheeks would flush as he screamed. "You don't, of course. Have you never in your life earned a single dollar? Only a freeloader who benefits from my labor." "I apologize." I would grumble as I attempted to fix whatever I had damaged. "Apologies. Doesn't it replace things?" He would go on. "You live in my home, consume my food, and wear clothing that I have paid for. What do you contribute to? Nothing. Simply make messes and break things." Every time something similar occurred, I would turn to my mother in the hopes that she would speak. Anything. But she'd merely busy herself cleaning or fussing with Sarah, pretending not to hear. On my 16th birthday, I made up my mind. I would no longer be Robert's freeloader. That morning, I woke up early and went around the neighborhood handing out flyers I had printed about my dog walking services. I had 3 clients lined up by the afternoon. "Do you wish to take dogs on walks?" "2 streets over, Mrs. Peterson," asked when I knocked on her door. "How come you teens have so much homework these days?" "I am able to handle both." I tried to sound more assured than I actually felt as I gave her that assurance. "I do well academically and treat animals with utmost responsibility." Despite her doubtful expression, she gave her golden retriever leash. "In any case." "Okay, let's test it out. Every day after school, Max needs to go for a stroll. $10 for each stroll, and it was only the start. It seemed strange because I had been babysitting Emily for free all this time, but Janet officially hired me as her after-school nanny because I was walking 5 different dogs, watching the Martinez twins on the weekends, and assisting old Mr. Cooper with his grocery shopping. In any case, I didn't spend any money on movies, sweets, or anything else that other kids my age did. 3 months later, I had enough money to purchase the smartphone of my dreams. Just a simple model for sale, nothing special. It was mine, though. I was beaming the entire day I got it home. No one could claim to have paid for something that was exclusively mine. Sarah stormed in without knocking when I was in my room putting up the phone. As usual. "What is that?" She pointed to my phone and demanded. She had developed the tendency of desiring everything she saw, and she was now 9 years old. I tried to sound neutral as I said, "It's my new phone. I used money from my employment to purchase it." Sarah's eyes became wide. "But I want a phone, Dad." She ran downstairs and screamed for Robert before I could stop her. My stomach fell when I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs. "What's wrong, Princess?" From my doorway, he inquired. "Erica has a phone and I want it." Sarah whimpered and pointed accusingly at me. What occurred next still makes my blood boil when I think about it. Not a word. Not one single word. Robert came over, took the phone from me, and handed it to Sarah. "Daddy has you covered, my love." Ignoring me entirely, he said to her. I was so furious that my vision was blurry. I told my English teacher, Mrs. Collins, everything about the phone, Robert's persistent taunting, and my mother's lack of interest the following day at school. After giving me a silent ear, she led me to the principal's office. Mom was called in by that afternoon. I heard rising shouts even though I wasn't there at the meeting. When Mom came out, her face was red with anger, but she had my phone in her hand. She didn't glance at me before thrusting at me. With her jaws clenched, she murmured, "Here. I hope you're content right now." Mom arrived to my room that evening after Sarah had been crying for hours about losing her phone. "You dare?" she hissed. "You have no right to act in such a way behind our backs. How embarrassing was that, do you know? All you are is a traitor." She didn't speak to me again for 2 weeks after that. Robert and she both acted as though I didn't exist, ignoring me as if I didn't exist, chatting as if I weren't there. Even at supper, they'd slide plates straight by me without recognizing my existence. The 2 years that went by were essentially the same. I worked at my jobs, tried to stay at home, and concentrated on my studies. I poured myself into my studies thinking knowledge was my path out. I applied for every scholarship I could find when my senior year rolled around. I was so anxious that I almost puked on the day the letter from State College came. I didn't open it until I was by myself in my room, my hands trembling so terribly I could barely rip the package. Dear Miss Thompson, we are glad to notify you. I had to read that 3 times before it sank in full scholarship. I was receiving a full scholarship from them. I had succeeded. I was going to college, and I wouldn't have to ask Robert for $1. Like a fool. I thought maybe this would make them proud. Mom could eventually see me again because of this. I waited until everyone was seated around the table for supper that evening. Mom, I have some wonderful news, Robert. My heart began to race. State College welcomed me. What? Robert's dish clattered as his fork struck it. You didn't tell me when you applied to college. Who are you, in your opinion? Making decisions like this behind my back, eating my food, and living in my home. It's a full scholarship, though. I made an effort to clarify. There won't be any fees for you. Damn yeah, I wouldn't pay anything. He spat. For a resentful freeloader like you, not a single cent. Constantly skulking, constantly planning something. Desperately, I glanced at Mom. She was using her fork to move food around while gazing at her plate. I begged you, Mom. Say anything, please. How come you don't defend me? When she did glance up, her eyes were icy. Why ought I to? You've never treated this family with any deference. You've never accepted Robert. You have only attempted to ruin my marriage from the beginning. Respect. Something inside of me snapped. Anger and anguish from all the years poured out. Show him respect. He is a horrible person and a bully. There's nothing to respect. The smack was unexpected. A single second. Anger was trembling me as I stood there. The next, my face was stinging, and Mom was standing in front of me. Her hand still raised. Get out, she muttered. Then more loudly, leave my house. I stroked the spot where she struck me on the face. I had the impression that I was in a bad dream. In a haze, I grabbed my backpack and crammed it full of whatever clothing I could find as I hurried upstairs. My phone, my school documents, the little bit of cash I had saved. The others would have to remain. Downstairs, I could hear Robert shouting and Sarah laughing, but it all sounded distant. I was standing on Jenny's front doorstep 10 minutes later, my biology classmate Jenny. When she answered the door and saw my face, the backpack, and the tears I hadn't even noticed were streaming down my face, she was the only person I could think to contact. She didn't ask any questions. She just pulled me inside and hugged me. I was anxious about how I would handle college while practically homeless as I sat in Jenny's kitchen, when Aunt Maria entered the room. Jenny has been telling me about a girl named you, she remarked, glancing up and down at me. Do you need a job? It turned out that Maria had an empty studio apartment above her small downtown Italian restaurant. Before I realized what was happening, she was giving me both half-rent free lunches, flexible hours around her classes. She said, like it was no big deal, the apartment is safe and clean, but it needs some work. I learned everything I could about the industry while working as a waitress. Maria was fair but firm, teaching me topics that I would never have learned in my college business courses. Observe how the food keeps returning from that table. That's why we record every complaint, she would say. Every compliment. Details matter in this business. It was a small apartment. Hardly enough space for a bed and a small refrigerator. It was mine, though. No, it was Robert who was shouting about freeloaders. No, Sarah shouldn't enter without knocking on the mail. Mrs. Henderson's penetrating gaze. Just my own space where I could study, sleep, and finally breathe. Maria promoted me to administrator by my senior year. On a Saturday, I received my business degree, and on Monday morning, I returned to work. Currently managing staff, inventory, and schedules. 2 years later, after I had risen to the position of manager, Maria told me, "You have a gift for this." She was sitting in her office looking tired but satisfied. Jenny tells me you two have been talking about partnership. I shifted nervously in my chair. We've discussed it, but good. She cut me off because I'm retiring. Restaurant's going to Jenny, but she needs someone who knows this business inside and out. Someone like you. My heart nearly stopped. Are you saying? I'm saying you two should run this place together. Equal partners. You've got the experience. She's got the passion. Could be a powerful combination. Jenny and I stayed up all night talking it through. I had savings every penny I could spare from the last few years, and she had ideas for modernizing the menu and expanding the business. We could do this, she said, her eyes bright with excitement. Really do this, Erica. Make it our own. So we did. I invested everything I had, and we turned Maria's traditional Italian restaurant into something uniquely ours. 4 years after that, we opened our second location across town. Sometimes walking through our restaurants, watching everything run smoothly, I'd think about my family. 11 years had passed since that night. Mom smacked me and threw me out. They were still in the city. I knew as much from infrequent glances of Sarah's social media posts, but we lived in separate worlds, right now. One day, Jenny and I were in our office above the downtown site, surrounded by spreadsheets and expansion ideas, when we heard the party arrive below. Sounds like the engagement party's here, Jenny commented, gazing over the booking calendar. 50 people should be a nice night. We had this custom, something we began when we initially took over the business. We'd go out and chat to customers, get their opinion, make them feel special. It was among the characteristics that distinguished us from other locations. I'll go check on them, I said, pulling on my branded jacket and fastening my name badge to it. You complete up with those vendor contracts. The sound of laughter in clinking glasses got louder as I headed downstairs. This kind of large gathering might result in repeat business, maybe even more event bookings. I fixed my badge and put on my best professional grin. Then I caught sight of them. Sitting at the head table was my mother. Although her hair was grayer than I remembered, it was still styled flawlessly. Somehow, Robert was beside her, looking the same but older. Sarah, too. Sarah was in a sparkling dress, holding hands with a guy in an expensive suit, the engagement celebration for my sister. I considered turning around for a moment, but before I could do so, Mom's eyes locked with mine, and I felt the recognition. Look who it is then. With a loud announcement, she turned heads. Tonight's waitress for us. A familiar grimace distorted Robert's face. I'm still serving tables at the age of 30. I can't claim to be shocked. I started to say something, but my mother interrupted. With a tone full of satisfaction, she remarked, I always knew you'd end up like this. Take a look at your sister. An economist in college who is marrying a great man. And you're still taking orders while sporting a name tag. Squeezing her fiancé's hand, Sarah laughed. Maybe she'll clean our dishes tonight, huh, Daddy? Show us her unique abilities. The florist as well. Robert got up, staggering slightly. He must have had a few drinks. Let's actually give her something to tidy up now. It went by so quickly. He snatched a salad dish from the table and threw it on the ground. Everyone jumped at the impact. I reached up to touch my cheek after feeling a sharp sting. My fingers turned crimson. Boops? Robert looked at the blood streaming down my cheeks and grinned. Waitress, you'd better get him up. As I stood there with a drip running down my cheek, my blood was boiling. I was ready to let out everything I had ever wanted to say to them, because 11 years of hurt and rage were building up inside of me. However, Jenny's voice broke the tension before I could say anything. She walked up with the composed authority she had learned from her Aunt Maria, saying, I think this situation requires immediate attention. She held our service agreement, which was leather-bound and featured the gold-embossed logo of our restaurant. In accordance with our service agreement, Jenny cleared her throat and spoke to the room. Section 3.2. Any patrons who physically or verbally assault our employees or property. She stopped thoughtfully and pointed to me, saying, You will be taken off the property right away. Ownership. Mom's jaw dropped. What are you discussing? You knew, didn't you? Was Jenny's grin incredibly piercing. You're talking to Erica Thompson, co-owner of this establishment, and 3 others across the city. The ensuing hush was deafening. As my mother gazed around the restaurant, I saw the color drain from her face, really took in the sophisticated customers, the tasteful decor, the framed evaluations on the walls, and all the success she had never bothered to find out about. That is. Robert muttered, That's impossible. But I could see the uncertainty slipping into his eyes. Furthermore, Jenny said, In situations of violence, we retain the right to suspend service immediately without return. She faced me. It's your call, Erica. I adjusted my blazer, wiped the blood from my cheek with my sleeve, and found my words. Clear the tables. Our personnel was under my authority. Now, all 50 guests must depart. The server quickly got to work clearing away the dishes and glasses. I heard the typical shriek at that moment. Robert's mother, Mrs. Henderson, gripped her spaghetti plate as if it were made of gold. "You can't do this." She screamed in the same manner that she used to pinch my cheeks and yell at me about table etiquette. "This is the engagement celebration for my son's daughter." She snatched back her dish as Miguel, one of our waiters, attempted to grab it, sending us flying. "Help, help! I'm being attacked!" Robert staggered forward, fury purple in his cheeks. "Remove your hands from my mom!" He moved in my direction, crinkled fists. Our security crew, however, was quicker. A third guard signaled that the cops were already en route, and 2 more moved to separate us. Sarah was crying uncontrollably. Her ideal engagement celebration was wrecked. "Mom, take action." Mom only stood there as she screamed. She looked lost, with mascara streaming down her cheeks. The woman who had thrown me out of my house and slapped me couldn't even look me in the eye anymore. There was mayhem for the next half hour. First on the scene were the police, who interviewed several witnesses who had captured everything on their phones. Still yelling threats, Robert was brought out in handcuffs. The ambulance arrived next, and a paramedic cleaned and dressed the cut on my face while guests streamed out, muttering among themselves. My phone rang 3 days after the event. Unknown figure. "Erica, please don't hang up," Mom said, her voice softer than it had been at the restaurant. I remained silent and waited. "Take a look at Robert. Charges are being brought by the police. You must let them go. This could cost him his job." "No," I said simply and hung up. The assaults on social media started within hours. In her lengthy and emotional initial post, Mom accused a vengeful restaurant owner of ruining her beautiful daughter's engagement celebration. The comments, overflowing with pity for her folks, swearing never to visit our eateries. Then Sarah joined in, writing about her psychotic stepsister, who couldn't stand to see her little sister happy. The post traveled fast among local community groups. Jenny discovered me reading the lies while glued to my phone. "We have it all on video, don't you think?" The security system Maria installed years ago. It automatically zooms in and records audio when it senses elevated voices or violent actions. The video was incredibly clear. Every syllable was audible. Mrs. Henderson's yelling, the plate accident, Mom's insults, and Robert's threats. I left a brief message in the comments section of Mom's tirade. This is what actually took place. The video exploded overnight. Other partygoers began uploading recordings of their phones. Someone had gotten the ideal perspective of Miguel trying to clear Mrs. Henderson's plate. Her face twisted in anger, pasta sauce going everywhere, his professional calm never faltering. Just that video received millions of views. Restaurant drama started circulating locally, then nationally. Food blogs picked up the story. Family crashes engagement party at daughter's own restaurant made headlines. Comment sections filled with individuals expressing their own tales of family alienation and poisonous parents. The repercussions were immediate. Already humiliated by his arrest, Robert's company was unable to ignore the widely shared video of him attacking his stepdaughter at her place of employment. They shifted him to a lower place in silence. He was found guilty of assault and property damage by the court. Mom attempted to repair the damage by removing her posts, but screenshots were irreversible. Sarah's wedding venue canceled on her not wanting to be associated with a scandal. Mrs. Henderson became a meme. The spaghetti woman. Her screamed face went viral on social media, watching the view count climb on that security footage. I remembered something that I used to tell myself in the dark days after Mom kicked me out. Someday things would be different. I would have the opportunity to make amends with my family one day. Someday they'd realize what they'd done and try to make it right. But seeing them in my restaurant that night, watching them try to humiliate me, even after all their success, even after all these years, I finally understood. Certain things are unfixable. Some bridges aren't designed to be repaired. The video ended up being good for business, but that wasn't why I kept it pinned to my profile. I kept it there as a reminder. both for myself and for others, that sometimes the happy ending isn't about forgiveness or reunion. Sometimes it's just recognizing that it's all right to walk away and never look back. Story 4, Story 6. The title of this piece is At My Father's Funeral. Since he is the biological son, and I am only my mother's child from a prior marriage, my brother sought the entire fortune. I said, 0. All right, I've given it up, but don't ever get in touch with me again. Like I would, he grinned and said, the inheritance is all mine after 3 months. Hello, everyone. I've been putting this story off for a while, but I've now realized how crazy it is all because of current events. It never occurred to me that my life would become a complex family drama. However, here we are. Maybe you can tell me whether I handled it correctly once I lay everything out for you, or if I'm as dysfunctional as my brother. This is how everything became so disorganized. Liam, my 23-year-old brother, and I didn't have the ideal family structure while we were growing up, but it wasn't a complete catastrophe either. Our dads were different, but our moms were the same. In no way was my biological father involved. Mom claims that Dad left when I was only a toddler, leaving her to raise me alone. Actually, I don't remember anything about him. Only a few old pictures and hazy tales of how, when I was around 4, he ran off with another lady. Liam's father, Anthony, was someone Mom met. In every aspect, Anthony was the complete antithesis of my biological father. He was trustworthy, stable, and truly kind. Even though he wasn't required to, he treated me as his own from the beginning. Even before he and his mother were married, I recall how he would take me out for ice cream or tell me stories before bed. Anthony went one step further and formally adopted me when he married my mother. I wasn't really sure what that meant at the time, but in hindsight, it was significant. It was more than simply paperwork. It was a declaration. He wanted everyone to know that I was his child in every manner that counted, even though he didn't have to. I recall the day my mother informed me of the adoption. She sat me down and told me that Anthony had seen a lawyer to formalize the arrangement. I still recall Mom stating, "This is Anthony's way of saying you're his no matter what." Even though I was only a young child at the time, Anthony didn't treat me as the child of a prior marriage after that. He attended every parent-teacher conference, every school performance, and every small turning point in between. "It doesn't matter whose blood flows through your veins," he would tell me. "My daughter is you." I've always remembered that, particularly as I grew older. Being aware that Anthony didn't have to pick me gave me a sense of belonging that I had never experienced before. That's why I never questioned Anthony's love for me, even when Liam subsequently began to undermine me. Liam was born a few years later. Having a younger brother thrilled me. The fact that we officially only had one parent in common didn't matter to me. I adored him, and he was simply my baby brother to me. We had a very typical sibling connection when we were kids. On Saturday mornings, we would connect over TV, play together, and argue over toys. For the initial years, everything was going well. But then tragedy happened, and everything was different. Mom died in a vehicle accident while Liam was in middle school, and I was 17, preparing for college. For me, it was abrupt and unanticipated. It was like losing my safety net when Mom passed away. No matter how terrible things went, she was the one who always knew what to say to make them feel better. The home felt quieter and colder when she left, as if life had been sucked from it. Despite Anthony's best efforts, there were some things that only Mom could do, similar to the quiet hum she had made when folding clothes, or how, without ever raising her voice without her, Mom had managed to persuade Liam and me to stop arguing. We all seemed to be attempting to regain our ability to operate, and none of us made a mistake. We were all devastated by her passing. However, it was a breaking point for Liam. Liam let out a scream during the funeral. "Why was Mom's death necessary? You ought to have done it. If the step-sibling disappeared, no one would notice." Any remaining love I could have had for him simply disappeared when I heard it, which made me feel completely exhausted. Despite my strong want to clap back at him, I chose to remain mute. However, the generally composed and level-headed Anthony lost it. I had never witnessed Dad reprimand Liam in front of everyone before, but no amount of shouting could repair the harm. From then on, Liam and I never had the same connection again. Liam changed once his mother passed away. He began to hold me responsible for everything. I was somehow to blame if things went wrong. I attempted to attribute it to misdirected rage. Being young, he must have been overwhelmed by the abrupt loss of his mother. At times, I questioned whether Liam's resentment began before we were even aware of it. Little traits like his constant need to win, even in the tiniest fights, or his tendency to become too attached to Anthony, were examples. Whenever I was complimented on anything during a family meal. When Anthony told me that I did a great job on a school project, Liam instantly poured his heart out on the table. Then started crying, since no one liked him. I believed he was being theatrical at the moment. It seems to me now like a sneak peek at what was to come. An inability to share the spotlight, and a drive to be the center of attention all the time. I suppose it was simpler for him to portray me as an outsider than to confront his own fears, even while we were family. However, his anger remained constant throughout time. It expanded. Liam began making light of me, particularly the fact that our fathers were different. Liam began making light of me, particularly the fact that our fathers were different. He would remark things like, "You're just a stepkid," or "You're not really part of this family." I initially dismissed it, assuming it was simply his grieving process. However, it became evident as he grew older that he truly felt I didn't belong. Liam's attitude grew intolerable by the time he reached his late teens. When it came to grades, employment, or anything else, he was always striving to outdo me. He took it personally when he was rejected from both his top institution and his ideal secondary school. In the meantime, I had earned my college degree and secured a respectable position at the municipal office. Liam saw it as competition rather than a moment of joy for me. Being Anthony's biological son was the only thing Liam could hold on to. He began to show it out as if it were a badge of pride. He would add, "I'm Dad's real son," as though it would somehow improve him. It was draining. For his part, Anthony never showed us any different treatment than he did. In every manner that mattered, I was his daughter. Liam, however, had a different perspective. He pretended that I was robbing him of something. Anthony's affection. Whatever. Pay attention. I moved out as quickly as I could. I needed time away from Liam and all of his negativity. I was sick of being pulled into his problems all the time, but I didn't dislike him. I used to plan my visits to Anthony so that Liam wouldn't be around. The drama wasn't worth it. However, Liam spent his whole college years at home with Anthony. "I'm here to he said, framing it as being responsible or loyal. But now, without him, I felt unmoored. But let's be honest, I didn't have a clue. Anthony simply didn't want to leave the comforts of home. He didn't need to look after Liam. Liam contacted me to boast when he got his first job after graduating from college, not to catch up or anything. "Your modest city office job is nothing compared to the one I landed at a much better corporation." "Oh," he said, "Dad's genes must be it. I suppose being the genuine son pays off." All I did was roll my eyes. Although Liam had always been competitive, he was now downright annoying. I immediately made the decision to further isolate myself. Life is too short to put up with such negativity. Then Anthony unexpectedly died. It was like losing my anchor when I lost him. His constant presence has always been taken for granted by me, but now that he was gone, I felt free. However, I had no idea that his passing would cause such a disaster. My already tense relationship with Liam would worsen as a result. It was intended to be a time of mourning and farewell during Anthony's burial. Naturally, though, Liam had to start talking about himself as soon as he arrived late, as he often does. I was aware that things would not go well. He didn't even acknowledge those who had been waiting for him or offer an apology. Rather, he entered as if he owned the space. I had been deeply affected by Anthony's death. He was more than simply my stepfather. He was my father, in every manner that was significant. Since Liam either couldn't be bothered or believed it wasn't his duty, I made the most of the preparations alone. On the day of the funeral, when the ceremony came to a finish and people began to go, he arrived as a guest rather than family. At last, Liam made the decision to take the big step. I was expressing my gratitude to some of the participants for their attendance. "We must discuss Dad's inheritance," Liam murmured, grabbing my arm. "How are you holding up? Not even?" Perhaps a brief period of contemplation over Anthony's life. "Let's go right to the point." I drew Liam away from the last few guests who were still present. I didn't want a full-blown incident at Anthony's burial, not because I wanted to save him humiliation. Now what? Already irritated and ready for whatever shit he was about to spit forth, I asked. With that smug smile he usually had when he felt he was outwitting everyone, he leaned against the wall. "It is easy," he said, as if he were teaching a kid arithmetic. "Since I am my father's biological child, I should clearly inherit all he left me." Half uncertain if he was serious, I blinked. Even for Liam, this was low. "Are you serious?" I inquired. "Not at all." Crossing his arms, he fired back. "You aren't even his biological child. It would be absurd if you received anything. You are only your step-sibling. A stepson who requests money might come seen as avaricious. You're not really related." That hurt a lot, but I kept that from him. Since I was a young child, Anthony had been my father, adopting me legally and treating me as though I were his own. He never once gave me the impression that I wasn't his daughter. But Liam didn't care about all of that. The only thing that mattered to him was biology. "Are you serious?" I inquired, attempting to ascertain how he distorted this reasoning in his mind. "Of course I'm serious," he sneered. Instead of an outsider inheriting, Dad would have preferred his own son. The phrase outsider struck me more strongly than I cared to acknowledge. I was often reminded by Liam that I wasn't truly a member of the family in his view. I was aware that he wouldn't back down if I didn't, and I would start a fight I'd rather not be in. Furthermore, I had no intention of wasting time arguing with him. I was already inconsolable at Anthony's passing, and I wasn't going to allow Liam to make me feel any worse. "Okay." Despite the fact that I was boiling inside, I said in a calm voice, "You can have everything, all of it. Here's the thing though, you never get back to me. Never. Not for cash, for assistance, for anything. We're finished." Liam grinned more broadly. "As if I would ever want to get in touch with you," he added, almost giggling. For a moment, I looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and rage. He may have believed he had won, but he was unaware of how everything would backfire. "Excellent," I answered. "Then we're in agreement." He stood there while I went away. There was a part of me that wanted to tell him the truth, that I had every right to half of the estate because Anthony had officially adopted me. However, I didn't. I didn't want to become even more like him, or make this situation worse. I immediately went to a lawyer the next day to start the process of giving up my portion of the inheritance. When I explained my proposal to the lawyer, he appeared shocked. "Are you certain about this?" he inquired. "Good," I said. "I have no interest in becoming involved with it." The attorney clarified that I was entitled to an equal portion as Anthony had legally adopted me. I didn't care though. All I wanted was to get away from the turmoil. I phoned to inform Liam that the paperwork was complete. I said, "I've surrendered my portion. Now it's all yours. Have fun." As he answered, I could hear the arrogance in his voice. "Excellent. It's about time. You made the correct decision." I didn't even try to answer. I simply hung up and made an effort to move on. I believed it would end there, that Liam would take his newfound fortune and permanently abandon me. I made it apparent that we were done and gave him the full inheritance, just as he had requested. No drama, no touch, just two individuals leading different lifestyles. Naturally, though, he managed to pull me back into his mess. My phone was inundated with calls and texts 3 months after the funeral. Can you guess who it is? I initially disregarded it. I assumed he would finally get the message that he should never get in touch with me again. However, Liam persisted. I gave up and responded after the 15th missed call, mostly to want it to stop. "Liam, what do you want?" Not even trying to hide my annoyance, I said. His voice was strained as he said, "I need money." Dad owed money. I left debts behind. What are you discussing? It was discovered that Anthony had some unpaid debts. Nothing extraordinary. Just a few things that are doable. similar to a small mortgage and auto loan. Naturally, Liam had spent all of Anthony's money in record time. He was now forced to make payments that he obviously hadn't budgeted for. "What's wrong with me?" I inquired. "The debts aren't the only thing." Ignoring my question, Liam went on. "Interest penalties are present. It's getting worse. I can't keep up, Morgan. You desired everything. Recall that I fired back. This is precisely what you requested." Liam's voice dropped. In a moment, he turned from appealing to accusing. "Didn't you know about this? Because you are envious. You forced all of the debt upon me. My father's true son is me. Oh, the nerve!" "Initially," I said, attempting to maintain my composure. "Until you mentioned the debts just now, I was unaware of them. Secondly, I instructed you to leave my life. So why are you phoning me now?" He started talking about how unjust it was, how this shouldn't have to be his problem. I ought to have forewarned him. I didn't stay to listen to the others. I said, "Figure it out, Liam," and hung up. That was the beginning, but I assumed it would be the end. Liam gave another call a week later. He attempted a new strategy this time. He went into full victim mode rather than blaming me. Immediately following the burial, he acknowledged that he had squandered all of Anthony's funds. There was more to the story. He claimed to have used such. "Liam, what are you not telling me?" Following a little poking, HOR 1305 19 13 26 23. "Not sure, but the others." "Who knows? Trips, devices, a new outfit." "So, Liam, what do you want from me?" Knowing where this was headed, I asked. "To settle the remaining debts, I need $8,000, he stated. As if that were the world's most sensible request. I was astounded by the boldness. "You expect me to save you now that you've spent the entire fortune in 3 months?" "Morgan, I'm desperate," he said. "I'll be all right if I can only pay off this debt." "Yeah," I said, "that's not happening." "Why not?" "My sister is intended to be you." I lost it at that point. "Liam, you've been treating me like trash for years. You referred to me as an outsider, a stepchild, and someone who wasn't related. Do you now want me to assist you become more realistic?" Liam persisted, though. He arrived at my place of employment a few days later. I had no idea how he discovered my workplace. During my lunch break, however, he was waiting for me in the parking lot. "Please, Morgan." He began to appear more unkempt than I had ever seen him. "I'll do anything. Simply give me the money." I let out a sigh. "I won't give you a cent, Liam. It's your mess." However, the auto loan has already been renegotiated. He objected. "The house has been paid off, and it is now merely $5,000. To clean the remainder, I simply need a bit more. It seems like you're doing well already." I said. "What is the issue, then?" He paused, avoiding making eye contact. It dawned on me then. The tale was not over yet. "Liam, what are you not telling me?" It took some probing before he opened up. "I bought too many things with the savings. I spent more than I had planned. Borrowed funds to compensate from a buddy. He's threatening me now. I'm in serious trouble if I don't reimburse him right now." It was there. Anthony's finances weren't the only issue here. Liam's own careless spending had put him in a worse situation. He was now in a frenzy. "You're amazing," I said. "I didn't want anything to do with the inheritance for just this reason. Liam, you're incapable of handling accountability. You couldn't—" "I'm aware that I made a mistake, but I can solve it with your aid. Morgan, just $8,000. All I need is that." As he extended his hand, he begged me to just give him the money, as if I would give it to him immediately. I slapped his hand off of mine. "I'm not going to pay." I spoke aggressively. "You are to blame for this. You squandered the funds. You're now paying for the additional debt you took on. I'm not there to protect you." I slid it, and Liam rubbed his hand while glaring at me. His cheeks was flushed with annoyance. "Why are you unable to just assist me?" "Because we are only half-siblings." "Is it the reason? Is that it? The worst are stepchildren. They are little more than strangers, yet they constantly act as though they have a right to everything." His remarks were painful. I wasn't going to let him see that, though. My stomach rumbled, but I maintained a calm demeanor. "Liam, you've been treating me like I don't exist for years. You now desire my assistance. You are pitiful, not taking place. I pivoted, climbed into my vehicle, turned on the ignition, and then backed off. To get the final phrase in, I slightly rolled down the window. Do not return here ever again. I'll call the cops if you do. And good luck getting yourself out of the hole, by the way. You're not smart enough to quit digging. After that, I drove away, leaving him standing there furious and red-faced. I looked at him in the rearview mirror, though. The way he stood there, fuming, made me shiver for some reason. I sensed it in my stomach. Liam was determined not to let this pass. He seemed to be planning a means to retaliate against me already, and I am currently there. Whatever ludicrous or spiteful action he attempts next, I'm prepared for it. This is far from over, but I'll keep you folks updated. One update. Hello everyone, this is the promised update. It would have been too simple, of course, but I wish I could say Liam took the message and went on. If anything, things got worse. And to be honest, I should have anticipated it. The man was not going to ignore it. Not after the manner in which I silenced him. It began modestly. I began receiving odd messages on social media. They came from accounts with arbitrary usernames and no profile photos. You act as like you're superior to us, and your family doesn't abandon you the way you did. I initially disregarded them, thinking they were spam or automated responses, but the tone seemed familiar, as if the sender knew me. I had a terrible suspicion that Liam was manipulating things, but I was powerless to stop it without evidence. Then he would phone my workplace in the city and beg to talk to me. The receptionist didn't give it much thought at first. She thought he was merely a worried relative attempting to contact her. I would get texts from her like, "Your brother called again. Shall I advise him to try again later?" I dismissed it, assuming he would ultimately understand and cease. However, Liam lacks the ability to read a clue. The calls began to come in every day, sometimes even more than once. He was obviously not only attempting to contact me, he was purposefully bothering my colleagues. I was summoned to the department manager's office one day. She gave me a sticky note with Liam's name on it and appeared irritated. "Your brother has been calling all the time, Morgan," she replied, obviously irritated. "You've even been accused of hiding from him by him. What's happening?" I felt ashamed. Liam was more than a bother. He made a concerted effort to damage my reputation at work. I told her I would take care of it and apologized sincerely. In the hopes that it might slow him down, I blocked his number. However, I ought to have known better. As I described the scenario to the man, one of my co-workers who witnessed the exchange, he did not back down, but instead doubled down. Smiling, she added, "Your sibling seems to need a pastime." Trying to lighten the atmosphere, she said, "Perhaps we ought to buy him a therapist or one of those paint-by-numbers kits." Even though I was appreciative of her efforts to ease the tension, I laughed. She had been a silent support system during all of Liam's shenanigans and was one of the few individuals who knew the whole tale. Liam chooses to escalate in spite of my repeated attempts to interrupt him. He arrived at my office one morning without warning or invitation, not prowling outside the building or waiting in the parking lot in silence. No, Liam would have found that too subtle. He went directly to the front desk and began to scream at the receptionist. "Now I have to talk to Morgan." His voice reverberated around the foyer as he barked, "I won't leave till I see her since she has been avoiding me." Liam refused to be calmed down by the poor receptionist's attempts. "Are you aware of who I am?" he yelled. "Her brother is me. After all, family comes first? Or is everyone here too preoccupied with kissing Morgan's ass to notice that?" I was embarrassed, angry, and incredulous as I observed him through the glass doors of my office. Even though my hands were shaking, I made myself remain calm. How did this happen? My life was in disarray because the younger sibling I had once helped with schoolwork was now shouting at my coworkers. I ducked into the restroom, locked the door, and drew a trembling breath as security eventually dragged him away. I tried to quiet the tempest brewing inside of me by splattering cold water over my face. What if I've done this completely incorrectly? For a time, I muttered to myself. Doubt began to creep in. Perhaps I ought to have taken a different approach. However, I recalled his arrogant, conceited expression and told myself that I wasn't responsible for cleaning up this mess. I could hear him shouting in the background as she called me in a panic. I didn't even make an effort to go to the front. Instead, I dialed security. Liam resisted leaving when the guards showed up. He caused quite a stir, yelling that I was abandoning my family and that I was too powerful to assist him. "Morgan, do you believe you're superior to me?" As the guards led him away, he smirked. "Being employed by the government in a menial capacity does not make you unique." He turned to look at me through the glass doors before he left. "It's not over yet. This is something you will regret." I was enraged. By bringing up my employment and his stupidity, Liam had gone too far. It was no longer just about me. My reputation, my coworkers, and my job were all being impacted. My boss summoned me back into her office the following day. She was strong, yet courteous. "We have to talk about yesterday's events, Morgan." I said. She said, "There will never be another disturbance like this. I know exactly what you mean." "It won't happen again," I said. I meant it too. I reported Liam to the police that night for harassment. I had no desire to, but he gave me no other option now. My statement was taken seriously and with empathy by the officer I spoke with. "Tell us right away if he tries to get in touch with you or if he returns to your place of employment." "Oh," he said. I had a feeling it would be the last straw, but Liam had another plan. He emailed the entire staff a few days later. The email was full of falsehoods, but the subject line told the truth about Morgan. He claimed that I had stolen from the inheritance, neglected my sisterly duties, and even included arbitrary images of bank records to give the impression that I had embezzled money. I was summoned into my manager's office once more, this time to speak with HR. A printed copy of the email was slipped across the desk by her. "We need to discuss this, Morgan," she added. As I read the email, I was trembling with rage. "All of this is false." With a quivering voice, I spoke. "He is only attempting to destroy my life because I refuse to pay him money." HR told me they thought I was telling the truth, but it was obvious that things had gotten out of hand. I followed up on my harassment claim and submitted the email to the police. They formally warned Liam that he would face charges if he continued to communicate with me or my place of employment. Liam must have been rattled by that warning because he became silent for the first time in months. No more phoning, emailing, or unexpectedly turning up. I was able to breathe again at last. However, the harm had already been done. Even though my coworkers were encouraging, I could sense that some individuals were still cautious since my reputation at work had suffered. When HR gave me the opportunity to switch to a new branch, I jumped at the chance. I went to a more peaceful area where I could concentrate on rebuilding after packing up my desk and bidding my staff farewell. He continued after that. "I received a call from my bank last week. The person stated that we must confirm a recent request for an account update. I felt sick to my stomach. When I asked for specifics, I hadn't asked for anything. They informed me that an attempt had been made to modify my security questions and contact details. The agent said the individual had claimed to be me, but the request had originated from a phone number I didn't recognize. My thoughts immediately turned to Liam. He had to be the one. Nobody else would even consider pulling such a stunt. The bank highlighted my account for fraud after I reported the occurrence right away. I'm the one who left stronger, even if Liam may have believed that his antics could control me. In addition to losing my assistance, he has also lost any remaining respect I may have for him. I'll provide another update if things slow here. However, given Liam, this may be the quiet before the storm. Let's see. The last update. Hello everyone. Since everything happened with my brother Leon, I wanted to give you all an update on how things have been going. I've been trying to move on and start over after the entire inheritance situation, the harassment, and ultimately having to call the police on him. If you've been following my story, you know it's been a mess. There hasn't been any noise. That's precisely what I required. Liam hasn't been in my life for a few months, most likely because the police made it very evident that he would get into major trouble if he did another stunt. To be honest, I never imagined things would go to this point. Even though we would never be close, I had always thought that we might at least be polite. However, I've come to the realization that clinging to that optimism was only preparing me for disappointment in light of all he did. Since Liam's recent activities put him in a difficult situation, I've heard tidbits of his progress. Things seem to have caught up to him after he burned through the fortune in record time and alienated everyone around him. He was sued by one of the persons he borrowed money from, a so-called buddy. By accepting a long-term repayment plan, he narrowly avoided the court-ordered consequences, but he is having difficulty keeping up. In addition, he still owes money on Anthony's auto loan. I've heard that he has also been lagging behind on those payments and is always struggling to make ends meet. Liam is currently living in a small apartment and barely making ends meet, according to a mutual acquaintance, someone I didn't even know was still in contact with him. It seems that he has even begged for assistance from members of his extended family. I'm shocked that nobody is biting. It turns out that people aren't very sympathetic when you act rudely and entitled. Life has been quiet for me, and I mean that in the nicest possible manner. It was a wise decision to transfer to a smaller branch office. This is a close-knit squad. The people here are wonderful, and the job is rewarding. Above all, it is a great comfort that they are unaware of Liam or the mayhem he wrought. I don't have to worry with drama leaking into my work life. I can just show up and do my job. Anthony is on my mind a lot. I don't think the pain of losing him will ever completely go away. However, I'm confident that Dad would be pleased with me for not letting Liam bring me down and for sticking to my principles. Anthony has always emphasized the importance of honesty and maintaining my peace, and I have done just that. The most important realization I've had from all of this: Liam isn't missed at all. The finest choice I've ever made was to cut him out of my life. Letting rid of harmful relationships, particularly those involving family, may bring a sense of liberation. I felt that I had to keep trying for the sake of my family for a very long time. However, I feel as though a burden has been removed. When a buddy recently asked if I would ever think about getting back together with him, I said without hesitation that I would not. There were several opportunities for Liam to show me respect, but he blew them all. I refuse to place myself in a situation where I may be harmed by him once more. Liam was still attempting to find me when I last heard from him. He even tried to find out where I had gone following the move by calling one of my former co-workers. Fortunately, he received nothing from my former workplace, and they promptly informed me of the situation. Since then, I've been extra cautious. Updated privacy settings, a new phone number, everything. I may have felt terrible for Liam in the past, but not now. He is currently dealing with the repercussions of the decisions he made. There is nothing I owe him, and I'm over feeling bad about putting my own mental health first. When the day is over, life is too brief to let the turmoil of another person to rule yours. I'm not allowing anyone, even Liam, take away the calm I've finally discovered. I appreciate your patience during this crazy journey. This update has undoubtedly provided me closure, so I hope it does the same for you.